Hello, wonderful people. Sean Tucker here, coach, trainer, and the man behind the mic in the brand new podcast, How Are You Really Mum? With the fresh male perspective, this is a place where we will unveil the layers and celebrate the woman behind motherhood. In How Are You Really Mum, we acknowledge the joys, the challenges, the growth, and the tears. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the How Are You Really Mum podcast with me, Sean Tucker, and I'm joined by an awesome lady here today, Eda Utku. She is a mother of two, a community leader, and an epic storyteller. She's a creativity coach who helps her clients design their offers, events, and workshops that promote and grow their individual communities. So, Eda, delighted. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. Delighted to be here. I love your work as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, I'd love to start with just asking the question, how old are your kids? Because
Okay.
you're a business owner.
Yeah.
You're also a mum. So how old are your kids?
They're both in school. So that's made a huge difference in how much I can invest in my business. And it's been a game changer that Zoe is now 5 and in kindergarten. And my elder, Lucy, is 7 and year 2.
Yeah, wow. How was that transition when you realized that, oh, wow, I actually have time now to work on the things that I want to work on?
Oh my God, parents, a lot of moms especially, they talk about, oh, my baby's going to school. For me, it was like, oh my God.
Was it something that just came back to you? Was it like that freedom of, wow, I've got all this time back again? Or what was it for you?
Oh, in the beginning, though, I will say it was emotional. Like when she first started, it's when that transition happens and you see your little one, especially in the school uniform, you're like, oh my God, they grow up so fast. In the
Yeah.
beginning, like a bit of a, you know, kind of getting used to the fact that she wasn't going to be around with me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it was like a little bit of boredom because I still, took some time to get back into my business. So I was still sort of transitioning mindset wise.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I have all this time. I'm so bored. What do I do with it? And I didn't really, know how to pick up the business from there. I just sort of like let it sit, did a bit of procrastination. And then from that boredom, along came Ed, became more active in his lovely online Zoom sessions and then signed up for his coaching. And he's been challenging me since, and I've been now running my meetup events
Mm-hmm.
and putting offers out there in the market, inviting people to come along for journaling sessions. Because personally, for me, journaling is a huge part of my mental well-being.
Yeah.
It helps me so much in clearing my head.
Yeah. Wow. I actually interviewed a lady earlier on in the beginning of the podcast when I started, a lady over in the US, and she heals through writing. So I totally understand and resonate in that because it's a powerful way to reflect and just get deeper and deeper because there's no hiding, I think, when you're writing in words, right? When you're speaking out loud and you're speaking to someone, there is an element where you can hide, but when it's just you and that paper, yeah, there's nowhere to hide.
Absolutely. And it always surprises me what comes out. And the two things that I thought were completely unrelated, like, a client interaction and
Yeah.
my childhood, when I start writing it, the connections come out and I'm like, oh, okay. So the way that I felt in that interaction, I can map it back to my childhood in some way.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Uh,
Really? Yeah, I'd love to know the process actually, if it's okay to share about what you're doing in that space of, putting on events and helping people understand the power of these things. Like, what is it about Eda Utku that people seem to just gravitate towards and really appreciate what you're giving them?
yeah. I feel it's because I'm a good listener. I'm a good storyteller. However, I think my real strength is in listening and encouraging other people to share their story. So when
Yeah.
I held my meetup in my community, a lot of my old friends showed up, and they had gone through so much, and it was such a great opportunity to catch up with what was new in their lives.
Hmm.
I encouraged them to share in front of others that they hadn't met. So even though I knew everyone myself, there were a lot of people who'd never met each other because they met me at different points in their lives.
Yeah.
And I encouraged everyone to share something in front of all these people. And they were actually like, we had such a blast, even though it can be potentially scary to share something in front of people you haven't met before. But the way I think I just put people at ease because I've accepted a lot of parts of myself, and
Mm.
people follow that lead, and we're able to have some fun, and you know it was just good lighthearted fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I've understood recently is the more work that you do on yourself, the more work you do on that being level of yourself. When your presence is given in such a way where people are just surrounding you, they're able to explore dimensions of themselves because you've gone through that. You've created that net of safety, I suppose, which has allowed then the people around you to explore those dimensions, shall they choose to do so. So I
Yeah.
think what you're doing is incredibly powerful.
And what I loved most seeing there was one of the ladies, and she's actually getting her novel published. I'm so proud of her.
Wow.
She's worked on this incredible novel, and she workshopped it in the writers group that I was a part of, and
Hmm.
now it's finally picked up by a publisher. Through her determination and tenacity,
Hmm.
her writing talents as well. And she was there with her mother.
Wow.
And she'd mentioned that she has a difficult relationship with her mother. But in that space, I could see them sort of ease up, relax, and share laughs together. And I loved seeing.
Wow. And something we spoke about briefly off air was this sort of idea of intergenerational sort of healing. And, we passed on memories from our parents of how they were brought up, right? And that's then how they were brought up by their parents. And it just keeps on being carried forward. So what you're saying there is interesting. It's really interesting.
I mean, I think the biggest theme that comes up with my mother and with this other author's mother is there is this resistance to creativity.
Yeah. How
Nobody takes
interesting.
it seriously, or people just think they're not creative, and they don't really encourage their children to be creative. Like it's like just follow the rules kind of mentality that they try to pass on to their children. Some children, they're more creative and they want to express themselves rather
Hmm.
than follow rules.
Yep. I mean, I totally understand that. And I feel like there's a need for more creators in the world, not more, people that just follow the rules.
Yeah.
Because the
Because
whole idea of,
there's fear, there's a lot
yeah,
of that comes, if you don't have
yeah, it's an old man's world that we're
rules.
still living in, right? Especially in the corporate worlds where it's rules, it's guidelines, it's policies, and it's not changing, though it is changing at the same time. We're in a weird transition phase. I really believe that because we do see that, yes, we're becoming more diverse and more inclusive, or at least there's a push for that. But when it comes down to the reality of it, there's still rules and guidelines, right? So there's
Yeah,
not a whole lot of
stroll.
space.
Yeah. And, the more creative we become, the more we challenge the rules. Sometimes the rules become a little bit more strict as well to kind of match the tendency to break out of push the boundary.
Mm,
And it is
yeah,
something that challenges me with my relationship with my kids as well. I mean, we have rules for a reason, but then
yeah,
sometimes those rules, they do outgrow them, and we have to, keep up with what's happening.
yeah. I'd love to ask you the question around what does creativity mean to you, Eda? What does it really mean to you?
Yeah, to me, creativity is enjoying life. It's not drawing or painting or writing poetry or, you know, um, you can show creativity in so many different areas of life. And I feel like
Mm,
people, they're very creative with numbers. I mean, there are some accountants who look at a, profit and loss statement, and they can see potential, and they can see a vision for their client and help them reach that potential or financial advisors. So it's not one thing. We can be creative in so many ways. It's not like, I don't want to limit it to just the arts. I think people can
Yeah.
be, some people create spreadsheets out of everything. They're very gifted with the numbers and they see, beauty in mathematical expression. So I think that that's creativity. Einstein was extremely creative and he was
Mm.
like a physicist. Yeah, I feel like creativity is it's putting out like things out into the world, and this can be in terms of spreadsheets. It can be like ideas, theories, scientific advances.
Yep.
It can be artwork. It can be paintings. It can be poetry. It can be dance movements, choreography, songs, you name it. Like if you're just putting out your self-expression, you're creating. You're
Yeah.
expressing part of
Interesting.
yourself.
Interesting. Because, I mean, the reason I ask is I want to get your expert opinion on that. But also, I've noticed, like what you're saying, creative expression is different from creativity.
Mm.
I mean, that is what finds expression from what creativity really is, which to me, how I understand what you just said is it's almost like understanding or seeing the picture full, the entire
Yeah.
chaos is not just like the lows or the highs of life. It's life itself is creative. It's
Oh,
creativity. And it's what we make of it is really the creative expression from that. So if we turn it into something, be it a business, be it, a profit and loss sheet, or whatever it is, it's turning that into something that maybe we want, or yeah, it's really cool.
yeah. And like adding to what you said, we can let some things that happen outside of our, there's a lot that can happen outside of our control, right?
Yeah.
If we take that experience and we turn it into something, and a lot of art comes out of that. I think it's a lot of it's healing in a way. Creativity is a form of healing. People take
Yes.
some experiences, heartbreak, or something didn't go according to plan, and then they see it as part of something much bigger, like part of life, and they understand it's just like a down point, but it's bound to go back up again. And it's like the economy as well, right? It never stays down. It's always a cycle that goes around. And when you're able to see that, creativity is the healing.
So I'd love to then ask you a follow-up question. Can you control creativity?
I've tried. It's not possible. It's like trying to control children. A lot of books where I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially when you're trying to create something, right? When you're trying to use that creativity window. I mean, there needs to be some form of boundaries for it to find expression, right?
Yes.
But creativity itself is boundless. I really do believe that. Like, there's no limitations to it. But you do need a framework. You do need those, how much time are we going to spend, or
Yeah.
when are we going to stop, kind of thing. Because if we open up, and I really believe there's so much problem in the world because of this, right? When students or when kids go through the school system, they get to the end, they're like, I know what I'm going to do, or they know what they're going to think they're going to do anyway, but they have these kind of pressures and boundaries that are placed, and then they try and figure it out what they really want to do, and it's not really allowing their being to find expression. It's really just following a pathway that's set up for them, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
A lot of a lot of career pathways, the corporate ladder, it is a bit like that. It's pre-planned.
Yeah, it's very logical, right? Which
So
goes
linear.
against, I
Yeah.
think, in many ways, though it can also enhance, because if we do have too many choices, or if we have too little boundaries, it's like we can't take all that information in. We don't know how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying is the structure, the boundaries, the
Yeah.
container has to be there to keep it safe. Otherwise, it just becomes a bit unhinged and, chaotic. And then people just get like, that can potentially lead to a lot too much chaos. And that's not good either. You got to have controlled, there's got to be a method to the madness and some sort of
Yes.
containers and rules and boundaries around it. creativity thrives around structure, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence of that.
Yeah. And I mean, to relate that to your journey of being a mother and raising your two kids, I mean, I think that itself makes a lot of sense because the kids, they naturally just waking up and every day is a new experience. Every day, every moment is something new, right?
Sure.
And especially at the age your kids are now, it probably takes the first 7 years or so before the more logical mind sort of starts kicking in and the memories start really repeating themselves in a way, right?
Yeah.
So I bet you're kind of almost seeing that if I don't have that safe container around them, then they're not able to find that expression or that lean into their creativity as much. So what are some of the ways that your kids, I guess, through your observation and through your experience, how do they express themselves in their creative senses?
Yeah. Well, my eldest she's become sort of like a mentor, even though she's only 2 years older
Yeah.
than my youngest. And so she teaches her what she learns in year two, which is really lovely. And she teaches it in a creative way with her own interpretation of it. And I love
Wow.
that. And what you also touched on, parenting. Parenting is actually really creative because we are creating and shaping young minds.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to be really creating a positive mindset, we also have to have a positive mind, a growth mindset ourselves. And
Yeah.
that means that we have to be able to see things from perspectives of, much younger people, our kids,
Mm-hmm.
and see the world through their eyes so that we can relate to them. That's intensely creative act. And my youngest one, the way she expresses her creativity is I don't encourage this at all, but she loves to pick up sticks and pretend she's like a medieval warrior. And I'm like, no, please don't do that. But then like, because it's a stick and she can hurt someone. But then like, okay, maybe she can do it if, we put pillows on and she knows to not hurt us in the face or, where we're vulnerable. Then, maybe she can whack the stick if you've got like, proper protection and she knows to just hit the places where we're protected.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds fun, right?
Instead of saying, no, you cannot do that, we have to think creatively and say, well, how can you safely do that if that's what you want to do?
Yeah. And it expands your like
Yeah.
rationale and your logical kind of thinking of like, no, you can't do that too. Oh, but maybe she can, but how do we make that happen? Yeah, I think that's really
And so
cool. And
safely, like, so she understands that we're trying to keep her and ourselves safe.
yeah, and I mean, we were briefly talking about this off air as well. Like in those spaces that you're creating with your events and things, it's the people that come there, right? The people that attend, and also for the future events, it's like if you don't have that safe space that is inherently created by you in those events, then the chances of people actually accessing those parts of themselves that they want to find expression, they just can't. They really can't. And I mean, how much, because I'm sure you're an avid observer of like what gets posted on social media and things like that, in that space. How much do you think is really people just limiting themselves when they write or when they throw themselves out there?
But it's good. You got to start somewhere. Even if you start with a thumbs up or a heart emoji, look, that's all good. Because a lot of people, what they do is they don't even do the emoji. And I had to train my dad on how to use the emoji. He kept seeing pictures of the kids and no response. And I'm like, I picked up the phone one day. I'm like, Dad, are you not liking any of this stuff? He's like, of course I like it. I'm like, here's how you express that you like it. And then once he picked it up, he's just, he's loving it now.
Ah, that's so funny. It actually reminds me, my father-in-law has created stickers now, of him, right? So he'll send stickers of like a thumbs up. He's doing a thumbs up or something like that.
Gotta start somewhere.
But it's interesting because we now live in a world, I mean, on social media where I think people are really imagining the worlds or imagining their reality that they're actually living in.
Mm.
So I think, like you said before, there's this kind of like chaos that's happening, but if you let it go too much, it's going to get found out. You're
Yeah.
going to get found out. You're going to potentially really fall into that chaos mess and find yourself in a place that you really don't want to be.
Yeah.
Because there's a
There
lot
are
of people faking it.
certain places that people will take you. And I'll give you an example. And this really triggered me as a mother and as
Mm,
someone who's working on her relationship with her own mother. I have this friend who hasn't talked to her mother for 24 years.
wow.
And I'm just like, and I'm trying my best not to judge, but at the same time, I'm like, that woman is now 82, and who knows how long she's gonna live. And yes, she might be at fault too. Of course, nobody's perfect, but regardless, she gave birth and, put some effort. Maybe not the best interactions were had.
Yeah.
However, I just feel so strongly that, you know, you need to reconnect with these people that played part in us being here today.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of that, right, is just reconnecting, dropping the judgments, right? Because we don't know what it was like for our parents to really raise us. We only experienced the being raised part, right? We
Yeah,
actually don't know what was going on in their minds, how the social systems were, like what kind of support that they had. There's
yeah.
so many uncertainties and so many unknowns that,
And even mental health. Like in my family, when I look at
yeah,
a lot of people were struggling with their mental health and depression. It's not, people don't always commit suicide when they're depressed. It can be intense crankiness, grumpiness, which a lot of my family are like that. And
hmm
they don't allow themselves to enjoy life and they don't seek help. But that's how I've got to accept it.
yeah, and that makes it hard for the kids to then find, joy in life because the neuroticism is passed on, right?
Yeah.
If they're thinking quite negatively and that is the nature of who they are because of the experiences and memories that they hold, then it's only natural for the kids to fall not too far away. Like the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
it is sad, but it's up to us. I mean, we can't change anyone's view or opinion on us. We can only change ourselves.
absolutely. And we have access. Thank God that we're living in these times where there's so much more access to mental health. I know it's not free. There
Mm,
are some free options out there as well, which is
yeah.
fantastic. And yeah, and I think what we have to raise awareness around is what I'm trying to also raise awareness within my family is
hmm
it's okay to ask for help. And I sometimes, I feel like I'm being a bit too heavy-handed, but
Yep.
then so in those, so when I feel like I'm just being a bit preachy, I have to go and journal about it because like, whew, I'm getting a little bit too intense about this. At the end of the day, it's really up to these people to decide what they want for themselves.
Yeah. And we are living in a mental health pandemic right now. I mean, the changes that we went through so rapidly just a few years ago during the lockdowns and things like that is wartime scarcity. That is fear mongering at its finest.
Hmm.
And these memories don't leave the mind so easily. Yes, the body will adapt, the body will continue to move, it will move forward, but we hold on to our memories and they're stored, unfortunately. And if there's any sort of levels of fear, this is why counseling and things exist, right? Ultimately, because say you were in a horrific crash and nothing happened to you, but you were in a car crash and people in the car died, like you might be fine. And you might say that you're fine for weeks and weeks and maybe even years. And then all of a sudden something triggers that memory and you're sent way back into that sort of traumatic conditioning that happened, right? This is the reason why we have counseling and mental health has become so much more talked about is because it's not normal for us to kind of just keep living without, it's not normal for us to just bury it in the past and just hope for the best.
Hmm.
We need tools to be able to deal and manage ourselves so that we can continue to evolve.
And it was interesting. You mentioned the pandemic, and I look at the first thing that people did when, there was this talk of the pandemic, the toilet paper. And I'm like,
Yes.
that probably takes people back to wartime trauma because that in our day and age of abundance, there's no shortage of toilet paper, really.
No,
It
that's right.
probably took people back to a few generations of intergenerational trauma when toilet paper was a scarce item.
Yeah, it's funny because, well, it is funny on one hand, but it's actually really quite sad on the other. But if we just see it in the middle, it is what it is, right? Because you're right, these memories are still being passed on, they're still being held in our minds. And what usually happened 2 generations before us is us as the kids of those 2 generations after are holding those memories or those patterns or behaviors that were given to us from that generation.
Oh yeah, like I'll still reuse the tea bags. There's so many tea bags in the world now.
Yeah.
Because my grandmother lived through a war and I spent some time with her and she always recycles the tea bags and recycles everything, which I'm not saying is a bad habit. I think that's a good habit because I also do recycle and reuse a lot of my plastics and, cardboard and all of that too. So
Yeah. Yeah, it just is interesting because a lot of what they did was because they had to do it.
yeah.
But now that we don't have to do it, if we bring a certain level of awareness and make it conscious, so if you just continue doing that pattern without much thought, then it's just an unconscious behavior or a compulsion that this is what my grandmother did and now I'm doing it, right? But now you're aware of, oh, no, it's actually a great thing because it's ecological for the earth, right?
Yeah.
It's very green, but I don't need to do it. There is an element where I could stop if I wanted to, but it's because you have choice now, right?
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, our life is just a big series of choices that we've made, and we're the ones in control of the choice, whether we are completely conscious of it or not. Yeah. And I mean, to relate it back to, child rearing, so many of what we think we have control over, I mean, I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast, but it's something like in the 20-something percentile range of that's how much influence you have on your kids now. It's not a whole lot of influence. And that itself is terrifying, but also empowering because they do say, it takes a village to raise a child. And we live in a social structure, and it's for us to kind of understand the rules of the game in order to play the game. So we make choices on what schools we send our kids to. We make choices on basically up until, I don't know, probably their age 16, 17 years old or something like that, depending on how rebellious the child is. But it's still a pretty important level of influence. Like there's a large responsibility as parents for us to really understand what level of responsibility we have. So what do you think, Eda, what do you think people are sort of missing out on? Not so much missing out on, but what, in terms of the responsibility that parents hold that maybe they're not fully conscious of, what do you think they need to improve on?
Yeah, I know for myself, I really need to work on making myself more fun and engaging for my kids. Because I do notice that I sometimes lose quite often I lose the balance and I give them too many responsibilities and things they must do as opposed to playing with them. Like there's got to be a bit of a balance between playing and also making sure that they're doing the right thing. And I was raised in a way where it was always like rules, responsibilities, and that was what was expected. And like that's why I avoided my parents because I knew every time I saw them, they were gonna give me something to do. And that really hurt the relationship. So I think you gotta keep these relationships light, fun, friendly, and keep the relationship. Like the relationship at the end of the day is the most important thing. They're not employees like these kids, right? They're people that we want to grow old with, that we want around, not because they have to be, but because they want to be around us.
Yeah, it's not so much management anymore, it's leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the best way, or it's not really the best way to lead. The only way to lead is to lead yourself first. So
that's
if
it.
you're not the living example, and I see this in so many industries where people are just making claims and selling stuff that clearly they haven't done themselves.
Yeah,
But we live in a world that is based on people grabbing that little neurotic thought in your mind and promising that it can be changed. Yeah. So
mm,
people are manipulating each other,
yeah,
especially in the online space. Like, for example, I don't know, you might find a fat loss pill. Let's just use that as an example.
mhm,
And let's say if you've been struggling with weight your whole life and you click on this one page, you build this trust with this person online. They direct you to some page and it's this magic fat loss pill. And you look at all the testimonials, you're like, this is it. This is my final destination of not being a fatso anymore.
mm.
And you get it and you take it and all of a sudden you're disappointed.
Because there's a reason why you put on all that weight, and you don't need to go down to the source of it.
Yeah, you fundamentally need to explore what it is in yourself. You need to make it conscious. How many conscious parents do you think there are out there, Eda?
Ed's my neighbor.
That's beautiful.
There are a lot of parents on this journey, so I'm very fortunate to see a lot of people trying like positive parenting approaches
Mhm.
and like really understanding psychology, really trying to understand themselves so they can relate to their kids. So I am super fortunate to be, but I know this is not the norm. However, this is where I've ended up, and I'm really fortunate to see like a lot of consciousness, a lot of parents going down to the kids' level to see things from their perspective. And I'm loving that. That leads me to be better. So I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by, parents who are not always succeeding, but trying.
Mhm. And it brings so much more curiosity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you're looking through the lens of what your child sees. Life is mystical again, and life really is mystical. We just think we know based on who we think we are. And this, we could go down this rabbit hole very deep and unfold it, but we're not going to do that today because it's not going to serve anyone. But my point is, what we think life is and who we think we are in the role that we play. Our kids don't need to be taught. Our kids need to learn.
Yeah.
They're already learning. For us to teach them, I think that's really the wrong attitude. It's us learning with them because
Yeah.
we get another opportunity. And I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful gift being a parent is really just going along with your kid and seeing life the way that you get a second chance to see what life really is. Very cool.
I'm so grateful to them because through them, I've been able to get in touch with my inner child and, see the wonder and the miracles of life again. Yeah, I can't imagine life without them. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very fortunate.
What's been some of the really hard moments for you being a mum? I'd love to ask that question.
Oh, yes. So yesterday morning, getting my kids ready for book week.
Uh-huh. Yep.
The weather here is so up and down, and we had a sort of a thick dress in mind for their book fair.
Mhm.
But because the weather was going to be really hot, I made the split moment decision to change it to a lighter, more summer dress. And my kids were like, no, that's not what we agreed on. And they pushed back. And I'm like, well, I know better than you. The weather's going to be hot. Look, the Bureau of Meteorology says so. It's going to be like 30 degrees. And they're like, no, that's not what we agreed on. We want to wear the thick dresses. And then my partner had to step in. He's like, you're being too controlling. And I was like, okay, fair enough. It's just like I had these like really emotional reaction to when I was a kid and it was hot and I had to wear something heavy and how uncomfortable, and I was just coming at it from a purely emotional overwhelm. And I'm so glad he stepped in. He's like, just whatever, just go with whatever they want to do, which is fine. And it worked out well. It got hot, but they were not bothered by it, so it was all right.
No. Yeah, interesting. I mean, that itself talks about we become emotional based on our memories. Yeah. And we haven't made that emotional logical because it's still stuck somewhere in us. And emotions are not logical anyway.
Yeah.
It's only the memory we can sort of make a little bit of logic out of, even though we only see a glimpse of what we really remember. And that can actually become very problematic because our bodies age, but do we really age?
Yeah.
Or do we kind of just continue our pattern of who we think we are? And we only remember, like, consciously what I'm saying here, because there's nothing wrong with our recorder. When I talk about this, we remember what we had maybe for dinner last night. But 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, do you really remember what you ate for dinner? Probably not, but
No, I absolutely don't.
your body will still remember.
Yeah.
Your consciousness in your body or your mind or wherever it is, it still has a memory of what you had. So it's continuing, is what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with the recorder. It's only our retrieval of that memory that becomes problematic. And when we go through experiences where it's quite heated or uncomfortable and unsafe, then we tend to store that as something that can then be triggered to becoming something far worse out of proportion than what it really is. And I think the power of what you're doing for your professional work can really help so many people. Do your kids actually do any kind of creative expression in terms of writing or reflection? And do you sort of encourage that with your kids at all, Eda?
Yeah, they're doing comic. Actually, it's so interesting.
Beautiful.
They just do like little comic stripping, especially my 7-year-old. She loves to look at the world and see it in terms of like, comic book characters, and she puts it into sort of like a narrative. And I like that. My youngest, she's a lot more like she's a lot more playful. Like she likes to play whatever the kids are playing, whereas my eldest she likes to just kind of figure it out for herself.
Mm-hmm.
And the youngest likes to figure it out in a group and just through talking. And yeah, they're very different personalities.
Yeah. Well, who's more like who in terms of your partner and relationship? Which kid would be more like you and the other one more like, or is it just like a mixed blend, do you feel?
Yeah, I think my eldest is very much like my partner, because my partner, he is really good at working by himself, and he
Mm-hmm.
gets best work done that way. Whereas I like to just be in a group, and that's how I get inspired and I get ideas, and I work much better in a group. So I'm like the younger one.
Yeah. So more collective rather than
Yeah.
separate. Yeah. Because we do have this, I mean, your personality is separate from everyone else's, right? But your consciousness is still, there's a sense of oneness that we're all belonging.
Yeah.
And this is kind of, I guess, the war that we sometimes find ourselves in is that we were talking about mental health before. People become so caught up in their separateness, their identity of who they think they are, but who they really are is actually just one with this whole consciousness that's constantly evolving. And that itself can break people's minds, of course, because it is happening, but it only takes us to realize that it is actually happening within us.
I mean, when you talk about the consciousness that's evolving, like the technology is taking off so quickly. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I've just became really hyper aware of is the fact that our attention spans are changing as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
could now judge my kids for playing on the technology and try to take it away. I do put boundaries around it. However, that's where it's all going. I might not agree with it personally, but there's no way that me as one person, I'm going to hold back that technological progress. So just have to go with that flow, because that's where the collective consciousness is heading. And it is scary how quickly everything's changing, but we have to flow with it.
Yeah. Attention span is a big thing. I mean, I myself practice, meditation and yoga practices to enhance and grow this attention and focus kind of level. But what do you do to make it so that you're not unconsciously letting it be controlled? Because you're right, we're on these scroll machines constantly.
Yeah.
And these apps and things are designed for us to grab our attention. And because this is just constantly going, as the machine speeds up, our attention span is naturally going to shrink because the amount or the speed at which we scroll is probably there's some sort of correlation towards how much attention we can actually hold in our minds, right?
Yeah. It is. So look, I don't watch news anymore. I've
Mm-hmm.
realized that my ancestors had no idea what was happening out in the world, and I feel like it's too overwhelming for me to see what's happening in corners of the world that, you know, and I do have some people in Turkey, which is where I'm from. So I hear their news from talking to them, but I don't from the news media because I feel like the news media, there's a lot of fear mongering that goes on and it
Yeah.
impacts me negatively. So I'm somebody who's quite sensitive. So I've turned that off. With social media, I do tend to just follow like safe accounts,
Mm-hmm.
people who are putting out positive stuff. Elwyn is one of them. I do love that she has this conscious intention to put out positive news out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite selective. It's like a diet, like anything else. You want to put in the good stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, I do have this tendency to get anxious and fearful, and so why keep doing things that are not good for me? Why keep watching things that are gonna push me over that edge? So being mindful of it, and putting yourself on a diet of what is safe to consume and what's not, I think that's a good step.
Yeah. Like you said, having that container, that safety level of this is where I can create. If I work outside of this, container, perhaps I'm going to fall into the chaos and my life will become that.
Yeah,
That's not what I want. So for me to stay integral to my values,
yeah,
it's about following these quite simple rules or principles. And sometimes we do bend them and it's
yeah.
okay to test the waters, but
And
yeah.
I just want to put it out there to people who are scared that if they turn off the news media or they don't follow it, they're going to be uninformed. You know what? There are so many people around you who will fill you in all of that stuff. Just talk to your neighbors and they'll fill you in. So that's what's been happening with me. I get my information news and I keep up to date through just having conversations with people.
Yeah. Now that's really cool. And we're actually drawing up to the end of our podcast today. But Ed, I would love to ask you a question, and it's actually going to relate to the little episode that happened yesterday morning with the outfits.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, knowing what you know now and going through that experience, and that everything was okay, what could you tell yourself in those moments of like chaos and change that you wanted to change what they were wearing, and your kids sort of rebutted, right?
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself now, what you know now?
Go with the flow. That's
Go
what
with the flow.
they're doing. Go with the flow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Really, go with the flow, because sometimes we try and control the chaos and we can't. We just can't. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Very wise. So there's one more thing before we finish up, and I'd love for our listeners and viewers, whoever's tuning in, to know how they can really connect with you, Eda, and what are the best steps to follow so that they can connect with you and get to know and appreciate you more.
I'm going to say LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I've been on LinkedIn. It's influence on me, but I'm loving it. I think LinkedIn is not what you think anymore. It has a lot of well-being content as well. And you know what? Our personal lives, professional lives, they all feed each other. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of really good well-being stuff on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'll absolutely link Eda's profile from LinkedIn in the show notes. And if you want to get in contact with her, just connect with her on LinkedIn or follow her and see what she's up to. And I'm sure if there's any events that she'll be hosting and you're interested in connecting more with her, you can reach out and contact. But yeah, Eda, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's so appreciated. And look, if you want to hear from Eda again, please let us know in the comments and we'll make it happen. Thank you so much, guys.
So thank you. Thank you, Sean.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this heartfelt journey. Just a reminder to please subscribe, tune in, and become part of our supportive community. Because mums, you're not alone, and the world really needs to know, how are you really, mum? See you next time. Bye for now.